Hey guys, what is up? Pelvic here, back with another video, and today I want to talk about the state of Archon Shadow Priest inside the War Within. There have been lots of changes and developments since I made my first video. I've had plenty of weeks to kind of test how it works in Raid and both Mythic Plus. So in this video, I'm going to kind of go over the good, the bad, and the ugly of the hero talent spec tree and talk about ways that we can change things or improve things, and also leave room for my feedback as well, which I will have a link in the description if you kind of want to see the full written version of this. And as always, I encourage you to post your own feedback if you can on the forums or wherever you can post feedback just to get that extra visibility. So let's dive in. Okay, so Archon is an interesting hero talent spec tree. If you kind of read the description, it's kind of you're going into a higher state, becoming an ultimate version of yourself. So this is kind of invoking a bit of like your cooldowns are going to do more, things like that. And the way that they accomplish this is by kind of revolving this around Halo. And Halo is going to kind of be an activator for more damage. So every 1 minute you can cast Halo. It deals a good amount of damage to the target and also makes them take more damage, as well as empower our own cooldowns by just making them stronger, and in some cases even last longer with a talent like Sustained Potency. They're also further juicing you up by making Power Infusion stronger and giving you a very beefy Surge of Insanity procs, as well as a bit more Shadowy Apparition synergy here as well. So the bigger kind of issues with this tree, there are a few that stand out, but I want to cover what's good about the tree first. So first things first, because it's revolving around Halo, this is actually an insanely powerful tree for off-healing purposes, which makes sense because this is shared with Holy Priest. So when you're taking this just by doing your normal rotation, you're going to be doing significantly more off-healing than you would be as Void Weaver, for example. Halo is just doing so much because it's not only pulsing out, which we'll show that real quick. It pulses out and then it also comes back in, and every time it hits something, it's healing them. So in a raid environment in particular, this thing is extremely strong in terms of healing, especially if the fight has any kind of like rot damage or ticking damage that's happening, or if the timers happen to line up with the 1 minute that you're pressing Halo for the next 15 seconds, getting that off healing down. I don't know if it's strong enough to actually like replace a healing cooldown, or if you would ever hold Halo for healing to lose that damage, but it is possible on certain fights. So right off the bat, that's one of the stronger points of Archon. Now the next one is kind of simplistic, just to think of what could be good here. And it's really, if you like the way that Shadow plays by itself baseline, like right now at the end of Dragonflight, you're going to like Archon. It's not doing anything that different than the normal base rotation, at least right now, where it's mostly just going to play the exact same way. So if you like the way that Shadow plays, you're going to like Archon. The main differences from a playstyle perspective is you're pressing Halo every minute for damage, and then your cooldowns will potentially last longer and be a bit beefier, but you don't feel that as much, kind of depending on the cooldown, and it's kind of doesn't really matter anyways. And then the other thing is you will be getting more Surge of Insanity procs, and Surge of Insanity procs are also more important to kind of weave into your rotation. You're kind of a bit more concerned about overcapping than you are before. But at least from a gameplay perspective, that's basically it. So that can be considered a positive if you like the base version of the spec and you don't want to be, too overwhelmed with new things going on inside of the Archon rotation. So, and then again, simply, which is not a surprise to anyone, if you like the way that Halo looks, you're going to like Archon. Some people, it's kind of hit or miss if they like the new animation for Halo and then how it radiates out and in. Just to be clear though, this new animation itself is available to Void Weaver as well, but the actual pulsing of coming back in, that's only a part of Archon. Okay, so that is basically Archon in a nutshell from the positive perspective. Let's go into what could be improved. Okay, so Archon, again, there are some things I'd really like to see looked at. From the original incantation of this tree, we really haven't seen any changes whatsoever based on our initial feedback, which is why I was kind of delaying making some of these videos because I wanted to see if they would iterate on it. It's been a few weeks, we haven't seen anything, so you're going to get kind of a bit more raw, unedited feedback here. It's just kind of boring, to be honest. I don't think it's doing enough for me, especially compared to Void Weaver. And I think the fantasy of like just looking at this image right here, I wish that we looked like this when we were Archon spec, and we don't get that today. It is supposed to kind of empower our cooldowns, but our cooldowns look exactly the same. So it doesn't really change visually how the spec feels, other than the Halo pulses, which is definitely something if you like Halo, but for something that says you're becoming an ultimate version of themselves, I kind of expected a bit more not only interactivity with what it's giving our cooldowns, but also just make them look cooler, and we didn't get any of that so far. And again, playstyle wise, there's not a whole lot to go off of here. You're going to play the spec, very, very similar to what you do today on live. And, I was just hoping for a little bit more here. I think a lot of these talents don't really change too much of what you're doing. It's a lot of like, hey, Power Infusion now grants you 10% more haste. It's like, okay, well, you might feel that a little bit, but it's still more haste than what you had before. I don't know. This is just also kind of reverting the nerf they made in Dragonflight. So, yeah, there's not a whole lot of feel things here other than the extra Surge of Insanity procs, and then if you're taking Sustained Potency, your cooldowns will last a little bit longer, but it's not like enough to where you feel like, oh, I'm just really in my cooldowns all the time, especially coming from like live Dragonflight when we have like minute-long Void forms with cooldowns. Yeah, you can get pretty close to that with Archon, but that's kind of what we have on live with enough gear, so it doesn't really feel that different, at least to me right now. So yeah, this is just kind of overall a bit uninspiring, and I wish that there was a bit more fantasy elements for sure, but also a bit more gameplay variation as well with something like this. The other thing I note is it puts a weird amount of emphasis on Surge of Insanity. So, I think they were kind of struggling on what to put else in this tree, and so they have 3 nodes related to Surge of Insanity. So every time a Halo is created, you gain a charge of it. And then the actual Surge of Insanity damage as well is increased by 25%. And then also Surge of Insanity also 100% of the time generates a Shadowy Apparition or conjures a set of Shadowy Apparitions. So I think this is also a bit weird because it's putting a lot of emphasis on an empowered filler spell, which is a bit weird to play with. If you're familiar with Shadow Priest on live, we kind of munch or waste some of those procs today, and that is definitely still possible, especially if you're playing Void form where there's just a lot of things to press, and you still have that same overwhelming problem that we have today on live in Dragonflight with Archon, even though we have lower amounts of haste and things like that. So even though the spec should be slowed down at this levels of gear, you're seeing similar levels of congestion in the rotation because you have to kind of prioritize Surge of Insanity more than we are currently. And then also in the damage breakdown, and I'm not making this up, it is quite normal for Devouring Plague to be 1, and then within 1%, that's Surge of Insanity, whether you're taking Mind Flay Insanity or Mind Spike Insanity. So it's a really weird damage breakdown where it's Devouring Plague and then Surge of Insanity is your 1 and 2. In certain cases, if you take like Distorted Reality, for example, Surge of Insanity could actually be higher than that. So it's weird. It's just a weird breakdown. It's not something I was really expecting. With like an empowered cooldown state, it's kind of hard to see where Archon is on the meter. Halo's doing like 5 to 10% of your damage overall. I don't know. It's a weird breakdown. So, and then, yeah, again, our cooldowns just don't feel very powerful. Okay, so the other thing that I'll mention from like an AoE perspective is that Halo still feels kind of weak at its baseline with the kit. And part of that is also when you cast Halo, we gain the initial insanity, so we get 10 insanity. But every other Halo that is created does not give any more insanity, which I think is contributing to why Halo feels a little weak. Even in the damage meter, it is a 1-minute cooldown now, so I think they could stand to buff its damage up even more. There is a talent in here called Energy Compression, which does increase the damage of Halo and the healing, but it just feels like baseline, the damage side in particular, is kind of on the lower side for a tree that kind of feels like it revolves around Halo more than it does our cooldowns. So I'm not sure where the tuning or the budget comes in, but overall things just feel weaker right now as Archon than they should be. So hopefully we have time to address that. All right, the last thing I want to cover in this video related to Archon is just kind of the ugly side of things, which is really just talking about bugs and implementation details that are a bit awkward. The main one that I want to cover is actually with empowered surges and manifested power, particularly with Mind Spike. So if we kind of go over here and we'll cast, if you're talented into Mind Spike, there is kind of an awkward interaction right now with how things are working. So when you press Halo, you can see that you gain a charge of Surge of Insanity every time that one is created. Now, the awkward part with this that currently exists because of the way you're casting Mind Spikes and that kind of thing, if you're in the middle of a normal Mind Spike cast and you get a proc of Surge of Insanity because of a Halo that was generated, you will actually consume the Surge of Insanity proc and only deal damage as if it was a normal Mind Spike. This does not happen with Mind Flay and Mind Flay Insanity because it's a channeled spell. So if you're casting a normal Mind Flay and you get a proc, nothing happens. The proc is not expended. Everything works kind of as expected. It's only Mind Spike that has that downside, which is, I'm assuming that's not intended, although it is not fully unexpected because one of the side effects of Mind Spike Insanity right now on live is also if you're mid-cast of Mind Spike Insanity and the buff falls off, your cast is just canceled. So there's a bit of awkwardness, particularly with Mind Spike, that does not play very nicely with this build right now, which is also making that Mind Spike in general is just not a preferred choice with Archon. You strongly prefer Mind Flay partially for that reason. They also did recently buff Mind Flay Insanity and kind of how it's dealing its damage. So yeah, there's some awkward tuning there for a tree that's revolving around that. It's putting quite a lot of preference into Mind Flay right now, and a good chunk of that is because of the bugs that are currently plaguing Mind Spike Insanity. If that gets fixed, hopefully that helps things out. Otherwise, there's really not too much to talk about here bug-wise. We're still kind of digging into how exactly everything works and making sure that it's implemented correctly, but this is all we've found so far related to Archon. So that's all we have for this video. Hopefully this kind of overview or state of Archon has been helpful. Let me know what you think of Archon in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.